Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I am going to be showing you how to make music like Djrum. As usual, you can get the project file and samples and MIDI and presets, all of that stuff from this video. It's in the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because it's already available and has been since last night. And yeah, let's get started. So, we're at 130 BPM. The first sound that we have here is the pad, which sounds like this on its own. So what this is playing, I'll show you the notes first. It's basically this chord progression where it's all just major and minor ninth chords. You can see what we have here. So like this first chord, for example, we have a D sharp major. And then we add a major seventh on top of that. And then a ninth. And we get a D sharp major ninth. And so these are a little bit more jazzy. You know, Djrum has spoken about jazz influence in his music a lot. And also just generally, like, this style is very jazzy and very jazz influence and uses a lot of these kinds of chords. And yeah, so it's just this chord progression. You can see with this last chord, it is still a minor ninth chord. We have minor chord, then we have minor seventh, and we have a ninth. But then I also added in this voice here, which is just actually another C, which is the root note, but it's between the seventh and the ninth. And so it kind of gives a little bit of a different vibe. If I turn that off, and then turn it on again, you can hear that. So yeah, so for the sound on this one, it's made using wavetable. What we've got here is we have a saw wave going into a low pass filter, and the low pass filter, you can see we have an LFO on that. So that's just kind of like slowly moving it. And I have the LFO, I have the re-trigger turned off. So this just makes it so it doesn't re-trigger every single time. And you can see like when I hit pause and play, it's constantly moving. So yeah, then I've also got a bit of unison on there. You can see we have the unison on the classic setting. I've got the voices all the way up at 8, and then we got the amount there. After that, I have a bit of chorus, kind of spread the sound out a little bit more and just make it a little bit more deep and lush. Then after that, speaking of lush sounds, we have this reverb here, which is of course giving it space as you would imagine reverb does. Then after that, we just have a saturator just to kind of fatten it up a little bit, and also just to give it some texture, because you can hear this kind of crunching a little. And usually with a pad, you wouldn't really want that, but with this style, I like how it feels a little bit more textured and warm. Then after that, we just have a compressor side chaining into the kick, and then a high pass filter, and that is it for the first pad. The next sound that we have here is this droning chord, which sounds like this. So this is just playing one chord. It's actually playing a G minor ninth chord, and then I did the same thing I showed you actually on that other chord on the first pad where we've got the G minor 9, right? Because we've got a G minor, and then we have a minor seventh, and then a ninth. And then we just added a G, the root note, in between that. Which kind of makes it a little bit more interesting. So this is, even though this track is in D sharp minor, you can see a D sharp minor, or D sharp major, excuse me, is actually the relative major of G minor, because you can see we have G here. Here's like G minor. It'd be like those two notes. If I put in a D sharp, it makes a D sharp major. So yeah, so this is just kind of like adding some sort of musical stuff over top of the main chord progression, where you can hear them playing off of each other quite nicely. For the sound on this one, it was made using analog. What we've got here is a square wave, and I believe actually, yeah, so I've got the pulse width up a little bit, and then I've got an LFO on the pulse width as well, just kind of like slowly moving it. Then we have that going into a bandpass filter, and the bandpass is being moved by this LFO here, just really slowly. And this gives it some movement. You know, with these kinds of sounds, like, you don't want it to just sit in one place, because, like, if we turn the LFO off, that's just not as interesting as this, where everything's moving all over the place. So yeah, then after that, we got the amp envelope set like this, and then the last thing inside the synth here is just a bit of vibrato, just to kind of give it that, like, warble, you know what I mean? Then after that, we have a bit of chorus to spread the sound out. Here's without that. And with it, so you can hear it actually really helps with pad sounds like this to kind of just give them that more like smooth character to it. After that, I have a bit of reverb to give it some space, and then we have a drum bus. Even though this is a pad, you know, put the drum bus on everything. Like, it just makes everything so full. And you can see with this sound, like, we're not even really shooting for fatness because you can see, like, I've got a high-pass filter on here. It's really cutting out all the, like, quote-unquote, like, fat frequencies. But this just gives it more fullness, you know? It brings out the reverb a lot. It makes it a bit more warm. It just gives everything a lot more texture in a way that's really nice, even though it is technically made for drums. Then after that, we just have a compressor, which is side-chaining this one to the kick. And then finally, we have a high-pass filter. And that is it for the second pad. The next sound that we have here is this third pad, which sounds like this. So this is meant to kind of be playing off of what this other pad is doing. I wanted it to just sound a little bit more detailed and a little bit more like kind of not more stuff happening, but just like kind of more changing and evolving. So this would be the last chord in this progression. Like if I put this on this pad here, you can see, yeah, it's just that same chord that's being played here. Same exact chord, but I've moved it to a new synth here to make it a little bit more interesting just when it hits that chord. And what we've got with this synth is you can see I've got it actually made in a similar way. It's made using wavetable. With this one, we're using a square wave, and then we have it going into a low pass with an LFO on it, just like the first one, just slowly moving it. And then I have the unison, on the shimmer mode. So it's a little bit different from the first one. This kind of gives it more like of a smooth feel versus that first one was very like deep, I would say. And yeah, then after that we have a bit of chorus, which is spreading it out, a bit of saturation to kind of give it some texture, just like you saw with the first one. And then we just have a reverb, and then finally a compressor side chaining into the kick, as well as a high pass filter. And that is it for the third pad. And then the next sound that we have here is this little ARP thing, which sounds like this. So you can hear this is just kind of adding some like extra musical stuff. Over top of the track, you know, it's almost like a pad, you know, because it just has so much reverb on it and so spacey. But yeah, this just kind of helps to make it a little bit more exciting because it's not just pads now. You have something kind of extra on top of it to open it up a little bit. So with this one, it's just this one sine wave here inside of operator. It's a really simple sound. Like, it's literally just a sine wave. I've set the amp envelope like this, so it's kind of like going into the notes like that. And yeah, then after that, we have a bit of chorus, spreading the sound out, making it a bit bigger and a bit more like warbly. Then we have some reverb. This is, of course, kind of like the whole thing with the sound. Just super long, you know, giving it a lot of space and making it very ambient. And then we just have a saturator to beef it up a little bit and give it a bit more texture. This sounds really good after the reverb, because you can hear that like slight crunch that you get on the reverb. And it also just helps to kind of bring everything out. Like, I'll show you. Here's without it. And then with it. And yeah, and then the last thing we have on here is just an EQ8 cutting out the low end. And that is it for this ARP pad sort of thing. Next thing we've got going on here is the kick, which sounds like this. So this kick's really simple. It's just about getting like a really fat and punchy kick sample, which if you want this one, link is in the description. But yeah, it's just this really strong, fat kick. The punches through the mix really well. And yeah, with this one, I've just got a bit of drum bus on it. You can see I've got the transients up a little, so that really helps with making it punch through. Here's without it. And then with it. And yeah, that is it for the kick. Next thing that we've got is the bass, which sounds like this. So here are the notes. You can see this is just following the chord progression. This makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on with the chord progression. You can see, like, these are exactly the root notes of all the chords that are being played up top. You can see it's a really simple progression. It pretty much starts and ends on the same note each time. You can see because it's like D sharp there, C there, C there. And then the only thing that's different is the second note the first time is G, and then the second note the second time is A sharp. So really simple bass line. But yeah, and then for the sound on this one, it's just this like kind of fat respace that I made using analog. You can see we've got two saw waves here. I've got the first one detuned a little bit, and then those are just going into a low pass filter to sort of dial it back a bit. Then we got the amp envelope set like this. And yeah, that is it for Inside the Synth. After that, I have a bit of drum bus to beef the sound up and make it just a bit fatter and more full. Here's without it. And then with it. You can hear, like, with these style of sounds, you know, this just goes a long way in terms of making it really full and really, like, fatten up the mix and fill up the mix. Then after that, we have this EQ8. Here's without this. And with it. So you can hear this is just kind of focusing the sound a little bit more in the low end. It's boosting the low end, and then also cutting a little bit around 100 just to kind of clean out some room there for the kick. And then speaking of cleaning out room for the kick, I also have a compressor side chaining this one to the kick. And yeah, that is it for the bass. We've got the kick and bass in a group here. You can see we just got a bit of saturation and a bit of EQ8 on there as well. Here is without those. And with them, so you can hear where we put those on. Like, these really do that last little extra step to pull these through and make them really work and be really fat and powerful in the mix. So the first thing is the saturator. This is pretty simple. Whenever you put some saturation on multiple things at once like this, it glues them together. It's like this effect. Like if you've ever just taken a distortion and turned it all the way up like this. That sounds kind of cool. As insane as that is, you can hear what it's doing is it's literally just turning it into one thing. And so that's what we're doing here. The saturator is just gluing everything together a little bit and then just not going as hard as what you just heard. And then the only other thing on there is the EQ8. So this is just cutting out a little bit of like low mid-range there, cutting out some mud. Also boosting a bit of mid-range there, which helps with the punch of the kick and also with the bass. And then we also have a low-end boost to make the bass much fatter like that. And yeah, that is it for the low end bus. Next thing that we have here are these percussions, which all together sound like this. And so I'll just go one by one here. The first thing is just this 909 hi-hat. Which, the main thing with this one is pretty simple. You can see it's just like a pretty nice 909 hi-hat sample. Got some drum bus, bit of a high-pass filter. I also have this decay being automated here, so it's kind of like starting out really small and then getting a little bit bigger like that, and then it goes down here. And yeah, and then the other thing you'll notice here is the velocities. You can see the first time it goes like that, and then the second time it's a little bit different. So yeah, just kind of like, you know, very fine details there, and really like making sure you go through and get like little nuances like this, because this really makes a big difference. You can hear this in the overall track. Like, listen to this. It's kind of taking the groove to different places when you have it in different settings. And yeah, that is it for the 909 hi-hat. Then after that, we just have this one. This one's really simple. It's just playing on the upbeats. You know, just kind of like a fat, like, hard-hitting sound like that. After that, we have this rim shot, which sounds like this. And you can hear with this one, it's just kind of like in a few different random places here and there, you know. Kind of mixes it up. The cool thing with this one is the pitching. You can see I've got it pitched to different notes, so kind of makes it sound a little bit more interesting because it's not just the same thing every time. It's a little bit different, and there's kind of like, it's a bit of call and response, you know? After that, we got this clap, which sounds like this. So this one, you know, really simple, just a clap sample. Got a bunch of reverb on it and some drum bus and a high pass. And then this one's hitting, you can see on the 16th note right before the 2 there. So it's kind of like... You know, it makes it a little bit more interesting than if we just did like... That's very straight. And I feel like that kind of takes you out of this like futuristic warping groove that we have because it's just so straight. But this way... You know, it's a little bit more interesting. And yeah, and then the only other thing that we have inside of the percussion group here, these little break chops which sound like this. So these are just these chops from different drum breaks. I'll show you them like the original samples. Here is what I started with. So just like this little and then the little hi-hats as well. And then you can see I've just brought these in here and just kind of peppered them in at different times. Like, it just kind of comes in here and there, you know. It's not like throughout the whole thing. It's not like we just took a breakbeat and just looped it underneath this. You know, it's kind of chopping it up a little. And fitting it into the groove. And you'll also notice there's a lot of reverse notes here, kind of like this one. Like that. And like this. So that's another way to kind of make it more fluid and interesting. And then with this one, I've just got a bit of drum bus and then a high pass filter. And yeah, and then I have all of that percussion inside of a group together. This is just kind of tying it all together. Here's with no group processing. And then with everything. So you can hear why we do this. It really like fills out the sound and makes it just more together and tighter. So the first thing on here is a bit of reverb. This just gives everything a bit of space. It kind of puts everything in the same room as well, so it makes everything feel a little bit more together. And then the only other thing on there is just the saturator, which is just kind of fattening everything up, you know. Kind of helps to give everything a more even texture because it's all getting exactly the same saturation, and thus it will all have a very similar texture from that. And yeah, that is it for the percussion. And then the last thing that we've got here is this little noise group down here, which has 2 noises. We have a vinyl noise, and then we have a tape noise. And so yeah, we're just layering these together. You probably heard this in the background of the track. It just kind of adds some texture. Like if I turn this off, it feels a lot more dry and it just doesn't have that same kind of like sonic quality to it. But when we add this, it gives it something a little bit more interesting that you don't get with just the instruments alone. You kind of need to add in some atmosphere like this. So you can see we just have a bit of saturation on that. I've just got that kind of like gluing these together and making them a bit sharper. Then we have a high pass filter after that because that has a lot of going, as you can hear. So we're just high passing it, you know, pretty essential with these sounds. You just want it to be in the high end. And then the last thing on here is just a compressor, slightly side chaining it to the kick, just to make it kind of like move a little. Because if you just have this sit on its own, it's kind of messy. But if we put the compressor on, it fits into the groove a little bit more and it kind of feels more like part of the track. And yeah, so that is it for the noises, and that is also going to be it for this video, guys. So, I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the project file and samples and MIDI and presets, all of that from this video in the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because it's already available. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.